Asian music will be later named as the Department of Music Research and presently known as the Department of Musicology. In the department, Maceda recruited researchers and student assistants, as well as co-professors, to mount an expansive project he called an Ethnomusicological Survey of the Philippines. This project lasted more than 4 decades. The project, funded in part by the university and various local and international agencies, dispatched field workers all over the country to record vocal and instrumental music from every linguistic group. Apart from his practice in music research and his teaching duties at the university, Maceda was also a distinguished composer who used his research findings as basis for his artistic creation. Facets of village life, such as ritual and ceremony, concepts of time, economies of labor sharing, technologies, as well as texts and soundscapes, provided thematic and conceptual materials for his highly conceptual and idiosyncratic works that ushered in the avant-garde movement among Filipino composers. I think this is something common among many Asian ethnomusicologists of his generation, where they were also composers, and they based their compositions from the data they have collected. Maceda conceived of a research center where ethnomusicological artifacts commingled with the composer's scores, just as instruments in the archives were used in the performance of new works, and academic conferences were organized in tandem with concerts of new music. Thus, the dual presence of scholarly work with artistic pursuits became the norm in the center. These materials are available to users with varying levels of accessibility. Materials whose ownership or authorship have been determined and validated may be viewed but require endorsement of their respective owners for lending out or duplication. Recognizing his invaluable contribution to the name of this, sorry about that. Okay, I guess I'm here. Okay. Recognize his invaluable contribution to the nation as a composer and as an ethnomusicologist. The state conferred to him the National Artist for Music Award in 1997, the highest title and honor bestowed to Filipino artists. Aside from this distinction, Maceda reaped numerous prominent national and international accolades, among them the Ordre de Palme Académique, sorry for my French, in 1978, the John D. Rockefeller III Award from the Asian Cultural Council in New York in 1987, the Philippine National Science Study Society Achievement Award in 1988, and the Fumio Koyutsumi Prize for Ethnomusicology from Japan in 1991. These recognitions received by Maceda, by extension, added value and prestige to the center, which he founded, and its holdings, which will soon be named the Jose Maceda Collection. I will talk more about details about this collection in a little while. So what I'm saying is, the collection, because of the awards that Maceda received for himself, at the same time the collection also grew in its value by extension. The UP Center for Ethnomusicology, from its beginnings in the 1950s as the Department of Asian Music under the University of the Philippines, the UP Center for Ethnomusicology was established by the Board of Regents of the University in 1997 to house the research data and related materials collected through the decades by Jose Maceda and his researchers. In its promulgation, the BOR, or the Board of Regents, outlined the mandates of the center. These are to develop, organize, manage, and conduct music research with focus on the development of new theories of music composition, distribution of music instruments, and recognition of fundamentals binding the musics of Asia and the relationship of languages to music structure, to serve as a source of teaching and research materials and to house all musical instruments, to publish and openly disseminate research of the center, to conduct dialogues, trainings, and conferences, and to obtain and manage funds, and so on. Okay? A chief impetus, however, for the formation of the center was less noble. There was political infighting within the College of Music that left the Jose Maceda Collection vulnerable to antagonistic administrative policies. Those of us who have been in the academy for a long time probably is familiar with similar situation. It's not always peaceful in our workplaces, and sometimes our work, our life work would be endangered because of political infighting. Maceda was deeply concerned about the survival of the collection, his life's work after his retirement from service to the community, or to the university, I should say. Thus, the founding of the UP Center of Ethnomusicology cemented its administrative separation from the college, allowing it to pursue its own agenda. To say that again, Maceda established the UP Center of Ethnomusicology to be separate from the UP College of Music because he thought it's kind of in danger at that moment, right then. To ensure its independence as a research unit, the center was placed directly under the administrative supervision of the Office of the Chancellor. Today, it's under the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research and Development. So, still located within the grounds of the UP College of Music, the center provided direct access to the faculty and graduate students of the college and catered as well to other researchers from within and outside the university. The center established linkages with international institutions and individual scholars, several of whom have also deposited copies of their studies and research data in the collection. It has issued LP recordings of traditional Philippine and Southeast Asian music, journals, books, a research manual, and other educational materials, and has organized various local and international symposia, conferences, and performances. A historical account of the center is incomplete without recognizing the overarching anti-colonial agenda of Maceda, which is to reintroduce marginalized music cultures into the mainstream thought as an essential part of Filipino identity, long neglected and forgotten. This personal philosophy was manifested in all his endeavors as a composer, ethnomusicologist, and educator, and in itself became the raison d'etre of the center. Research into Philippine indigenous music and culture was regarded as an advocacy. It is apparent, nevertheless, that the center was created and operated by academicians in the service of academia. The stakeholders involved in this enterprise comprised of the state, represented by the university, the center's users, made up of members of the academy, and the researchers and contributors, along with their heirs, who still own partial rights to the materials deposited in the center. Looking at this picture in hindsight, and through the lens informed by current concerns in the discipline, one does not see the cultural carriers, the singers, the musicians, storytellers, local experts, and the like. In other words, the class formerly known as informants. What then is their proper role in the pursuit of cultural conservation? What I'm saying here, at this point of the center, it was really about by the academe, for the academe. The center continued in active operation until the passing of Jose Maceda in 2004 at the age of 87. Thereafter, the post of director was taken by Ramon Santos, who, like Maceda, is composer, ethnomusicologist, and national artist. Santos immediately instituted reforms, beginning with the restructuring of the organization into 3 sections: administration, archives, and library. An administrative officer was assigned to manage office, facilities, finances, and personnel concerns. Likewise, she was tasked to maintain linkages with other units of the university and agencies relevant to the work of the center. The archives section was headed by the collections manager, responsible for maintaining the digital archives collection, the physical archives, and the instrumentarium. A librarian, on the other hand, supervised the provision of service to clients and managing, maintaining, and ensuring accessibility of published materials in the collection. Early in his term as center director, Santos oversaw the enormous task of conducting an inventory of the accumulated holdings that included books, field notes, recordings, artifacts, and various paper documents, as well as personal memorabilia which have been retrieved from Maceda's office and his house on campus. True to the original configuration of the center as conceived by Maceda, Santos ensured that these materials were kept together to form a unitary, integrated collection. He was able to secure 2 classrooms in the College of Music and convert these to house the instruments, the audio and the videotape, books, paper documents, and the administrative offices. Let me now talk about the Jose Maceda Collection. The value of the center's archives lie in its being not only the first, but the most extensive compilation of music in the Philippines, adequate to present a survey of the music cultures of various ethno-linguistic groups in the country. The core of these holdings is the Jose Maceda Collection, which comprises mostly of the materials accumulated by Jose Maceda and his colleagues as part of what I mentioned earlier, the Ethnomusicological Survey of the Philippines. This extensive field research project that lasted from the 1960s to 1980s. The collection includes 2,500 hours of field audio recording, some 421 containers of field notes, and around 800 containers of related paper documents, 10,000 photographs, and 1,000 musical instruments from various linguistic groups in the country. The collection also included materials from Maceda's field research outside the country, namely from Brazil, from Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Thailand, New Zealand, Ghana, and Nigeria. Apart from these ethnomusicological materials, the collection also included scores, recordings, and documentation related to Maceda's own compositions. In addition to the Jose Maceda Collection, the UP Center holdings contain materials donated from different institutions, such as the Kumhyang Jeju Pungru from Korea, Mahasattam University, Shinakarinbirot, and Mahidol University from Thailand, the Vietnamese Folklorist Association, the National Taiwan Normal University, the Peña University in Cambodia, the National Museum of Ethnology in Paco, Japan, among others. Likewise, individual scholars have donated their research materials to the center. The center continues to accept materials for inclusion in their collection, given that the data content of the materials are relevant to the UP Center of Ethnomusicology's mandate, that it contains research or analytical data on ethnomusicology, musicology, folklore, linguistics, and anthropology, and that general physical condition of the donated materials is at least in stable condition. In 2007, the Jose Maceda Collection gained international recognition by virtue of its inscription to the UNESCO Memory of the World Registry. Dietrich Schuller, then the director of the Phonogram Archive, Austrian Academy of Sciences, who was a longtime friend and associate of Maceda, nominated the Jose Maceda Collection for inclusion into the registry. This prestigious and exceptional designation allowed the center to access grants and other funds for its regular operations and special projects. In the meantime, the stability of the aging collection demanded urgent attention. For the center to successfully fulfill its mandate as a storehouse and dispenser of knowledge in Philippine music, it should first ensure the lasting protection of its holdings. Since the establishment of the center in 1997, Maceda has been mulling the challenging task of digitizing the collection. This is the primary method of protecting the holdings. However, he was held back by the prohibited cost and the instability of the digital conversion technology available in the late 90s. Finally, in 2007, this is about 3 years after his death, the digitization project began through the generous financial support of the National Commission for Culture of the Arts the Office of the Chancellor of the UP Diliman, and the Phonogram Archive Austrian Academy of Science. Initially, the project focused on audio recordings of the Jose Maceda Collection. However, as the conservation work progressed, field notes and photographs were included, along with the encoding of descriptive metadata, which was completed by 2014. The UP Center for Ethnomusicology then began processing other collections through what we now call the Digital Archiving and Database for Endangered Music Collections Project, which was funded by the Department of Science and Technology. The center documented the entire procedure of digitization and compiled it in the form of a manual aimed to assist other organizations in conserving their own collections. Furthermore, by virtue of being one of the first units to complete digitization, the center has become a model for best archival practice in the university in the country. Recently, we have inquiries for assistance from agencies such as the Philippine Information Agency, and also, in fact, Philippine Congress has asked for our assistance in digitizing their recordings of proceedings in the Philippine Congress. So the third phase is redirection. With the restructured and rejuvenated center, along with the completion of the digitization of its holdings, the center began to look into the future by crafting a strategic plan with the aim of expanding the collections and increasing the production of new knowledge. Central to this goal was the resumption of field data gathering, which were put on hold during the center's reorganization stage. The plan involved revisiting the sites where Maceda and his colleagues conducted fieldwork from the 1950s, with the primary objective of investigating the retention or change that has transpired in the music cultures concerned after the passage of several decades. So what we decided, we will retrace the steps of Maceda and his colleagues beginning in the 1950s and check on the music there. Has it survived? Has it died? And so on. An important component of this revisitation involves repatriation of musical recordings to the communities where these were originally gathered from. For this purpose, the center compiled special limited edition of CDs from its audio archives for distribution to various sectors of the community where they were first recorded. The initiative was dubbed Recollection, in reference to the remembrance of old voices and sounds of the community, as well as the gathering of new data to update information stored in the archives. In 2013, the repatriation of some of the earliest field recordings of the center began in northern Luzon. This consisted of some 44 tracks of vocal and instrumental music of the Campanay in the municipalities of Sagada and Bontoc in Mountain Province, recorded in 1954 by Lester Brooks and in 1956 by Jose Maceda. The center prepared a special limited edition DVD compilation of these tracks for distribution to various sectors in the community, including the mayor's office, schools, the museum, and the centers of the recorded performance. So what we did was we looked for the family of the informants recorded in the tracks, and we gave them copies as well. Sessions were organized where culture bearers and experts in the community were asked to listen to the tracks and comment on this. Okay, this is following what Ruth Stone calls the feedback interviews. What we did was we would bring the recordings, we would play them, and we would record or video record the community listening to it and documenting their reactions and their comments. Okay. 60 years after the tracks were recorded, local people still recognized the songs and sometimes even the singers. The team was able to fill the gaps and correct errors in data, such as specific towns of provenance. They were able also to collect new recordings of songs and rituals in Sagada and performances in the annual festival held in Bontoc. Here are some pictures of that repatriation project that we did in 2014. The repatriation of recordings in data gathering continued with the Recollection 2016 held in another municipality in Benguet called Cabayan, which is also in northern Luzon. This time, a total of 82 tracks of music of the Ibeloy were compiled from recordings by Maceda in 1961 and by Masantos in 1987. So the same thing, we compiled it in special CDs and distributed it to various sectors of the community, such as the government, community leaders, schools, and the surviving informants. And as before, we did the feedback interviews. We let the community listen to it, and we recorded their reactions and their comments to the recordings. This time, however, the team included students who came to be trained in fieldwork methods. The center adopted this component of student training and dubbed it as the Maceda Field School, which affords graduate and undergraduate students a first-hand experience of data gathering alongside seasoned field workers. The Repatriation Project in Cabayan coincided with local celebrations called the Bindian Project. Various performances, events, and rites were held in the municipal grounds attended by the local government officials, delegations from each village, as well as visitors and tourists. At the highlight of that program, the mayor received formally the copies of the recordings, and the recordings were played over the sound system to the delight of the audience. The Reconnection Project follows a growing trend among archives in returning data to communities from where this was collected. So many institutions have done this, for example, the Hopi recordings in the Yolngu, in Arnhamlan, as well as the Sami in Arctic regions. We follow the same mode of repatriating recordings to the communities from where they were first collected. The Recollection Project, with its key component of repatriation, signals a fundamental shift in the center's mode for cultural conservation. Where before, the center took on the role of custodian of endangered cultural artifacts within a safe haven, the center now recognizes its role in reconnecting these artifacts with their source communities. In essence, this constitutes an expansion of the conservation process from the preservation of objects to the fostering of attitudes and behavior towards the maintenance of cultural practices. So the question is, okay, so we have gathered all this data, which in time has increased in value, it's protected, but what is it doing there sitting in our archives? So in the last phase of the center, we decided might as well bring it back to the communities where they came from and see what will happen. Will this impact the communities now? More importantly, by the repatriation of music recordings, the center recognizes the true ownership of these sound artifacts, the communities that produce them. In turning over these artifacts, the center sets no restrictions on the use of the recordings. The owners may use them as they please. So we just gave them back, and it's for them to use in whatever way they please, because we said they own it. The ultimate hope, however, is that the voice, sounds, and memories inscribed in these recordings will impact the contemporary expressive culture of these communities. Okay. Under my directorship, we, upon the retirement of Ramon Santos, we acknowledged the success of the Recollection program. And so from there, we instituted a 5-year action plan drafted in 2017, which we call the roadmap. And at the center of the roadmap is what we call the Recollection Repatriation Project. Okay. In addition, the center is laying down the groundwork for a venture that shifts view of conservation even further. The direct involvement of the community as the primary researchers, archivists, and conservators of their own endangered cultural practices. The UP Center for Ethnomusicology envisions the establishment of a community-based music documentation in Ifugao in northern Luzon. In 2014, we encountered a community group in Ifugao called the Adimaiku Association. And in our fieldwork, we realized they expressed the desire to establish their own center of documentation in their own village. So we decided this is the new direction where ethnomusicologists go, no longer in the academy by academicians, but in the community itself. The role now of ethnomusicologists in the academy would be to transfer skills and technology to allow the community to collect their own data. Although now commonly practiced in many parts of the world, a fully operational and self-sustaining community-based documentation center in Ifugao will be the first of its kind in the Philippines, and we're still trying to begin this project. It aims to provide preliminary research and documentation of the groundwork required for identifying the information needs of the community, skills and training requirements, and best practices in documentation and archiving. So hopefully we will be able to find the grant to be able to build that documentation center here in their village. Tracing the history of the UP Center for Ethnomusicology, the preceding account at the same time attempts at the understanding of the transforming ethnomusicological praxis in the country. It has shown how a scholar's devotion and determination laid the foundations of the discipline in the 1960s, resulting in the establishment of a center mandated to safeguard the assemblage of research data, which will eventually be recognized for its invaluable contribution not only to national patrimony, but as a legacy to all humanity. In the beginning, the ethnomusicologist was motivated by the urgency of recovering endangered cultural objects that are embedded with meanings waiting to be unlocked. Knowledge released from these collected objects, which are recordings, material artifacts, and written accounts, can only bring benefit particularly to the post-colonial search for a forgotten national identity. Thus, they are valuable and require extraordinary safekeeping within a secure environment. Because of this collection's vulnerability, not only from the ravages of nature and time, but from the instability and capricious nature of academia itself, the preservation of this distinguished collection became the overriding preoccupation of the institution. As technology in the form of the recorder was a means of retrieval of these objects from the field, then technological processes in the form of digitization became the means of preservation in the archives. Subsequently, convinced that the real conservation of heritage can only be attained at the level of the source communities, the original sites of cultural production, a redirection of the center commenced. The need to return to the field was recognized, not only to renew connections with music communities, but to repatriate as well copies of the materials collected from earlier generations. For if indeed these materials were embedded with valuable knowledge, then it is essential for these to be restored to their source communities who may unlock this for their own benefit and purpose. So what we're saying here is who gets to unlock these mysteries embedded in this precious collection. This point of view says it's the community who may be able to do that. The initial move towards a decolonized research methodology is being pursued further with a proposed community-based documentation center that emphasizes capacity building and self-determination among local actors. Here, local researchers will help formulate indigenous perspectives and perhaps alternative methodologies. In examining their own culture, they will be able to select and prioritize what to document and curate, what to sustain and how to do this. And finally, how they want to present this to be presented to the outside world. This is not to say that the center has relinquished nor downplayed its mandate to safekeep objects from the field in its archives and library. which continues to be a valuable resource to both the practitioners and outsiders. More than ever, these cultural objects highlight not just the histories inscribed in them, but for new possibilities that they allow. And this is the end of my presentation. I'm not sure how much time we have left. Quite a lot. So, if you have any comments, or I will be glad to hear, or questions. Yes?
Well, that's fantastic. We're very pleased when you mentioned the Yolngu from Australia, because obviously we're doing the same sort of project with Paradisec in Australia, and obviously you're well aware of that. I was very interested in the track that you've taken in order to be able to create an archive with the community itself, because that's something we're grappling with ourselves, but we've decided that as everything is online and very much accessible in the 21st century, that they are able to tell us which things they want public and which one they want private, and which is sacred and all of that sort of stuff, and have the projects inside their community to repatriate to their community with their help and understanding. But you've taken it one step further by looking for the capacity to be able to hold it, the material itself inside the community. So I have a question. How do you choose which communities, given that there's so much material? I have a second question. How do you keep those regional community archives running? Because it's hard enough to keep the ones that we have in the universities running. So funding and accessibility, I guess, are the two questions.
I don't have an answer for the second question yet.
No.
We'll see when we get there. Regarding the first one, which community? This is a community named Hingyon, where the association that we encountered, the Abimaiku, is based in. In that village, they have an aging cultural bearer. She's probably in her 70s, 78 maybe, who still remembers all the songs. And they have expressed their desire to establish the center there. Right now, the organization is concerned with teaching their young people the old music and dances, and performing this around the area. But we thought that would be a perfect site. Okay. Of course, the question, the concern of how effective will they be in encouraging surrounding villages as well to allow their own materials to be stored in that center. We haven't quite figured that out. In fact, that was one of the questions asked to us by a potential fund grant. They said, how do you make sure that there's no politics involved, that they will ask, other villages will ask, why them, not us, and so on. Again, no straight answers at this point.
Yeah, I have something else that I'd like to ask, because it's something that we're grappling with Paradisec at the moment, that when the songs have gone back into community, and Granny has sung it to the granddaughters, because we have a particular project with women's songs, and the young women who might be 12 to 25 years old don't care about the music in one sense, because it's not what they're currently listening to, because they're listening to world music in all of its forms and spaces. But if they do care, they're reinventing, they're using the substance material of their great-grandparents and reinventing it into a contemporary pop song. And that brings itself a question about the preservation of intangible heritage. I'm wondering if your communities have had that conversation.
As far as reinvention, they're in fact very active in at least this part of the country, the northern Philippines, is very active in continuing on and reinventing the tradition. And so I think they're very happy to hear the old versions of this song. Having said that, it's not free of problems hearing these old recordings. Let me relate to you one case where we were asking somebody in the community to help us transcribe the songs. But her husband was so mad because he said, I should not hear these songs. I'm not supposed to hear them yet. There's a certain ritual passage which we were unaware of before he was allowed to hear those things. So these things we cannot see in advance. It only happens when you actually go and do the work. I hope. Yes.
Thank you for showing us the the path going from one place, safekeeping, and then back to giving back to the community. I find that this is more and more possible in this century because everybody has capability of making video and camera and recordings of very good quality, and even the not so good quality is pretty good. Better than like when Jose Maceda first has instruments, you know. But what I'm wondering is, with this, you come from here and then we go back to the community. There's a couple of things that seem possible, and I wonder if you can a little bit talk about that. You put the stuff back to the community, so we know that they get something, and the problem is some people don't care. Okay. What about the people who are over there that get interested and will start to record again the current generation, even though it may be changed, but it's still considered to be the same genre or type of music or something, or ritual or something like that. So I guess what I see is when they record themselves, what is the role of your collection capability of, you know, safekeeping those things that are now done by everybody? Even in Facebook, sometimes we find very valuable things that can be lost the next time the hard disk goes down, or Facebook decides to go out of business, or whatever. So we still need safekeeping. So can you talk a little bit about that future?
So, when we presented the idea of community-based documentation center at the university, the same question came from the university, asked us, how are you sure that this document, this recordings will be safe in the community itself? So their requirement was just, it should have a duplicate, which again will be kept safe within the university. But with the agreement that you still own this, we will just have it for safekeeping, and we have no right to use it outside of what you intend to, or without prior consent. So that the university thinks that way. Whatever recordings that they do on their own, we still keep part of it, a copy of that, in the university.
Okay, I think that's one step. When it comes to university for safekeeping, there's this issue of who can have access to the material.
Right.
Now, this is a problem that comes from all the beginning. You know, there are other universities other than yours where they have archives, and only certain people can get access. You know, they have to have a letter, or they have to be a scholar. There's all kinds of rules. And that's the old way of safekeeping. Now, let's say YouTube as a repository. It doesn't last forever because nobody's really safekeeping it, but it's open to the public. That's one factor. The other factor that comes to my mind all the time is that traditional, or what should we call, community-based knowledge is always known to everybody. There's nobody standing around in the community saying, no, you can't sing that, or you can't show that. If somebody comes in to record, you can't do that. People just do it.
Right.
So we have a little bit of a gap, you know, I think it's getting bigger and bigger between so-called safekeeping and who has the right or who can have access. So how does that sound for your, you know, at the university? How do you deal with that?
With existing collection, the old recordings done from the 1950s to the 60s, we still encounter the same problem because many of these are not fully turned over, and so you have the right of the authors to still endorse access to the collection. In the Philippines, we're not there yet as far as the concept of open access, and the university is not fully convinced yet. If you ask me, I'm all for open access as well. So probably we'll get there, but a few things have to be worked out as far as the university is concerned. With things concerning like the law, you know what I mean. But for the intended community-based documentation center, it depends on the agreement that we will come to with the village. But what we're offering there is we will only keep this for safekeeping in the university, okay? And whoever has access to it will first need endorsement by the village. That's as simple as that. So that means we don't have a right to use it in whatever manner, as far as the university is concerned, without your prior consent. That might be, at this point, of course, just an idea, and I don't know how workable it is yet until we get there. I hope I addressed that question. And it's funny also about your comment about technology being a way of conserving all of this. But it's also a concern as well. Now, when we began repatriation in 2014, CDs were the thing. Right? Today, you can hardly find CD players. So we have to rethink. How do we do the process of repatriation this time? We give them USB sticks? I don't know. Or we put it online and they have access, then that opens it to everybody else.
Well, that's exactly the question I'm bringing up. It has something to do with the concept of copyright. That's where it sort of comes from. And I've been thinking about this for a long time because in Indonesia where I work, my field work, is, my research is there, we have this exactly the same question that you're talking about here. It seems like copyright is a very Western concept, especially in terms of recordings. I don't know about books before that, but I'm thinking specifically about music. It might even be an American, you know, in charge of this whole concept. But what it means is when we have copyright, it is the person who wrote a composition who has the right to do something. I think that's fair because it's one person. But when we talk about a whole community, we're talking about a cultural knowledge, which is a very wide and subconscious kind of thing. So to put a copyright of that is very questionable. The recording companies that come in to record from the villages or whatever and can sell, they're very happy to have copyright because then they can say, I made the recording, nobody else can sell this particular instance of the recording. See, so again, when we have a copyright for something like that, it narrows the access to the general universe of humanity is what it comes down to. You know, I think something like your archive is about knowledge, not just to people who want to come to your place. You hope that anybody can hear it. Because from there, people can get an idea that will take them to the next step. No, I guess that's not really a question. just discussing.
In fact, the issue here, at least in the Philippines, is not really copyright. But when you're dealing with traditional culture, cultural heritage, there's another law that applies to it, which is concerned with indigenous traditions and properties. And so if you do field work, if you want to collect data in a tribe or in a village, you have to get clearance from a national agency, especially because the practice or the cultural object belongs to an indigenous community. Now we thought, if it is the community itself doing the documentation, then you skip that process. You don't need all the permits anymore. Right? You don't have to go to a national agency to ask permission to do data gathering, because it's the community itself doing it. Yes.
Yes, maybe this is not a question, but it's additional information. That in Indonesia, we try to record all part of Indonesia, the music and so on. And then we try to distribute it so people will know each other, the music from any part of Indonesia. But then after some times, we had a problem because some group of people are request for the copyright. So we have to stop distributing the recording. Now we have a pile of recording, but we cannot distribute it because some group of people are asked for the copyright of their recording. I think that is some just information. Thank you.
Dr. Anandaya.
From your experience, throughout this experience of making the first recording by Professor Jose Maceda, and then to Professor Ramon Santos until now today, that you try to get some kind of young generation involved and then return it back to the village. Do you feel that is the musical methods altered at all during this process? Is the musical methods or the music methods, as we related to this morning talk, do you feel that it's altered, or is the meaning changing, or does it find new meaning in itself, or what is your experience with this?
I said it's a complex question. It reminds me of the theory of the social life of objects. Like I said, these recordings, when the center collected it, it gained a life of its own. It changed social life. It had its own value now. It became precious. And so when Maceda garnered all of these awards, the more precious the collection became. Of course, the value of it to the academician, to us, to the ethnomusicologists, is different from the value that from the community. And that's what we're trying to see now by returning it to them and seeing, is this still valuable to you? Because to us it's valuable, but probably for the wrong reasons. We're trying to unlock meanings because of the questions we have regarding our identity and so on. But are these the questions that matter to the community? We don't know. One area that the repatriation of these recordings addresses is the lack of material in the villages itself. Our Department of Education, about 5 years ago, implemented what we call the mother tongue-based learning. In the Philippines, we have more than 100 or so languages. But when kids enter school, they begin learning in English or the national language, which is Filipino. Now, this concept says from kindergarten to about 3rd grade, they should be taught in their own language, using materials from their own languages as well. And of course, they don't have that now. And so somehow returning these materials to them helps fill that vacuum. They don't have any materials to use. Okay? But of course, this mother tongue-based language has problem of its own as well. Sometimes it's a question of, okay, what is the mother tongue in this village, because we have 3 languages spoken here, things like that. But I think we're in the right direction of making this accessible to teachers, for example, in classrooms. Thank you. Yes.
When you reach out to the community, does the community actually aware that there is actually an archive of their previous cultural? Do they aware of that?
Not all of them are aware of that. So sometimes we would have students from the community visiting our archive and then realize, wow, you have this. I didn't know that you have this. So it's a surprise to many of them that we have these recordings of the 1950s kept here. Yes.
It's very moving to hear about this work that you have done and that people have done for so many years. And it has surprised me because it turns out that it means a lot to me as someone whose main interest is in Western classical music, because I see that although often this, for example, Johannes Brahms or Franz Schubert, the sound of the music is reproduced in many places, but the more I learn about the meaning of it, how it matters, then the more I start to see that that is a precious and somewhat vulnerable resource, something that could be lost, something that must be intentionally preserved. So I see, all of a sudden, I think for the first time, that ethnomusicology must have great lessons for people who are working in other domains. So I'm noticing that one of the things that ethnomusicologists must struggle with is balancing inclusion, wanting everybody to have access, and also sacredness. And that these two things usually are in conflict, or at least sometimes are. And mostly I wanted to reflect this to you, but I also wonder, have you heard this from anybody else? There is the broader question of how to preserve the wholesome elements of traditional life. And I have often wondered about how this could be achieved. I found one answer in Laos, in Luang Prabang, where the wholesome things, wholesome artistic traditions of the local people are preserved because people from foreign countries long for wholesomeness and want to come and find out about them. So there is a kind of tourist traffic that gives the Lao government funding for these things. So I have often wondered, could it be that wholesome traditions could best be preserved by making them a tourist attraction? It seemed a little strange. If you have any ideas about that, please also let me know. Thank you so much.
Yes, tourism plays a major role in the awareness of many cultural practices. That this is true in the Philippines. And in fact, it has provided probably an avenue for village musicians to continue their art, to probably earn a little from it. It has given encouragement to teachers, to teach it to the young people. However, it's not that simple. It also means now they're doing it for a different purpose. Now they're giving it different meanings. Now they have to emphasize certain elements of it that could be appreciated by outsiders. A lot of cultures have grappled with this situation. So, for example, in Bali, well, they have a lot of tourists coming in to look at cultural performances. They have so far managed to preserve certain performances just for their own, right? So in many villages, that's true. The same thing in the Philippines. They have opened up certain aspects of their culture to outsiders. We offer it to you, you can come. But certain aspects as well, they keep just for themselves. It's not always an ideal balance of the two, but tourism is there, and tourism is real, and villages have to just grapple with problems. I hope I addressed that. But to dismiss tourism and their cultures of their festival cultures, for example, to dismiss it as it's not authentic. Probably it's not right, because somehow they also have positive contributions towards the conservation of these traditions. But it has to be balanced with other concerns as well, by the way, not just the concern of income and similar. I hope I agree.
For your insights, this is definitely something that all music profession can contemplate on in the future in their works. Thank you very much.
Thank you.